When I opened the front door that evening, Brandon didn't even say hello. He was already inside by the time I turned around, holding my laptop in both hands like it was radioactive. I still had my bag over one shoulder and keys dangling from my fingers when he said, "Why didn't you tell me you were talking to Noah?" I blinked, the words not quite registering, thinking maybe I misheard. "What?" He turned the screen toward me, and I saw my own Gmail account open to a thread I didn't recognize, an ongoing conversation with Noah, my ex, filled with late-night flirtations, emotional confessions, memories from college. "Brandon, I didn't write those," I said instantly, my voice shaking before I could stop it. I haven't spoken to him in years. He didn't answer. He just stood there, staring at me like I was something he didn't recognize anymore. The silence between us was thick and choking, and when he finally spoke, his voice was flat. "You logged in from our IP address. It's your name. It's your tone. How do you explain that?" I stepped forward, heart pounding so loudly I felt it in my teeth. "I don't know. I swear to God, Brandon, I didn't send these. Someone must have, someone hacked your email to flirt with your ex." He wasn't yelling. That's what scared me. Brandon didn't need volume. He had silence. "Do you hear yourself?" I tried to take his hand, but he pulled back, like touching me would make it worse. "I need time to think," he said, walking past me toward the door. "I don't even know who I married." That line gutted me. Not the emails. Not even the fact that he believed them. It was how easily those words fell out of his mouth. I don't even know who I married. As if 6 months of waking up next to each other, sharing coffee, planning our dumb little Sunday errands together, none of it mattered anymore. He didn't wait for a response. He just left. I stood in the hallway too stunned to cry, staring at my own laptop screen like it might offer me an answer. I didn't know how someone got into my account. I didn't know how they knew what Noah and I used to call each other. But I had a sinking suspicion who had the motivation to make something like this happen. The next morning, Marjorie showed up at our house. Of course she did. She didn't knock, she never knocked. Just waltzed in like she had a key to more than just the front door. Her heels clicked against the floor as she walked in carrying a candle in a white shopping bag. "Thought this might brighten up the energy in here," she said, all cheer and sunshine. She pulled it out and set it on the counter like a hostess gift. I stared at the label, "Tranquil Home." I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just watched her. "He told me about the emails," she added softly, placing her sunglasses on top of her head. "I'm so sorry, Harper. It's just, well, I think he deserves honesty, don't you?" There it was. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't even pretend to wonder if maybe this whole thing wasn't what it looked like. She already had her script. Her performance was calm, measured, supportive, but the venom was in the details. In the way she set the candle down and wiped her hands on a linen napkin like she'd just cleaned up someone else's mess. "Brandon's hurting," she continued. "I just think he needs time to breathe, and maybe we should all stop pretending everything's perfect when it clearly isn't." Her smile was sharp. Not cruel, just confident. Like she'd finally gotten what she wanted. When I told her I didn't write the emails, she tilted her head, touched her pearls, and said, "I want to believe you. I really do. But people don't change overnight, Harper. If there's something you're not telling us, it's better to come clean now than drag this out." I didn't answer her. I didn't trust myself not to scream. Brandon moved out that night. It wasn't a dramatic exit. No suitcase slammed, no shouting. He just packed a few things, took the dog, left his house key on the kitchen counter, and said, "I'll be in touch." That was it. No explanation. No discussion. No curiosity about whether the woman he married was actually being set up. When the door closed behind him, it felt permanent. Like something had already been signed, sealed, and delivered, and I had never been part of the negotiation. 2 days later, I got a text from Marjorie, "Brunch at my place. No pressure. Let's talk like adults." I knew better than to go. I went anyway. I don't know why. Maybe I thought she'd finally slip up and say something real. Maybe I thought Brandon would be there. Maybe I still believed someone would believe me if I just showed up and acted normal. I walked into her house, the one she claimed she'd been planning to sell since 2019 but somehow never listed, and found a round table of perfectly dressed women sipping mimosas like they were on the set of The Real Housewives of Passive Aggression. Marjorie stood to greet me. "Everyone, this is Harper," she announced. "Brandon's," she paused for just a beat too long, "wife." I forced a smile. The room smelled like citrus and powdery money. One of the women, tan, bejeweled, with a face that didn't move when she smiled, leaned forward and said, "Oh, you're that Harper. I heard about the emails. What a mess. Honestly, though, sometimes those old flings are hard to shake, right?" I choked on my iced tea. Another woman piped in, "I just think it's brave, you know? To show your face here after all that." I couldn't. The laughter that followed wasn't cruel. It was worse. It was casual. Polite. Like I was a cautionary tale in a designer sweater. I looked over at Marjorie, and she just gave a soft shrug. "We all make mistakes," she said gently. "I'm just glad you're taking accountability." I excused myself to the bathroom. I didn't cry. Not yet. I looked at myself in the mirror, hair tied back, makeup melting, and I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. I used to be sharp. Funny. Loyal to a fault. Now I was a ghost in a house full of people who thought I was pathetic. I left early. Didn't say goodbye. Marjorie texted later that night, "I know it's hard, but I really do wish you peace." I didn't respond. A week passed. Then another. Brandon didn't call. Jess stopped returning my texts. I deactivated Instagram after Marjorie posted a photo of Brandon at dinner with her friends, captioned, "He's smiling again, blue heart #healing." I wanted to throw my phone across the room. But instead, I sat still. I let the silence settle. And that's when I realized something. Marjorie had spent years perfecting the art of control. She could steer a room with a raised eyebrow and end a marriage with a whisper. But the thing about people like her is, they're always watching center stage. They never notice the girl behind the curtain. And I've always been good at watching. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. I just packed a single suitcase, zipped my laptop into the side pocket, turned my phone off, and drove north until the road emptied of buildings and the air stopped smelling like the past. I landed at my sister's cabin, a crooked little place tucked between pine trees and mud, where the Wi-Fi barely worked and no one expected you to explain anything. I opened the windows. I took long walks at night. I cooked exactly one thing a day, usually eggs. It took almost no effort to vanish, which honestly scared me more than anything. There was no resistance. No one banging on my door, no one calling me to come back, no frantic texts begging for an explanation. I just went still, and the world didn't flinch. The first few days were a kind of emotional blackout. I slept more than I should have. I stopped wearing a watch. I didn't journal, didn't even try to process. I sat on the back deck with a blanket wrapped around me and stared out into the woods like they might have an opinion. Somewhere out there, Brandon was already filling in the space I used to occupy. I knew it in my bones. I knew it in the way his last message, 3 words, "You left fast," felt less like a question and more like a performance, Like he wanted a record that he'd reached out even if he never intended to understand. After the first week, I started noticing how many things in my life had been curated by other people. The throw pillows that Marjorie picked out for our wedding registry. The art prints she suggested we frame above the couch. Even my phone wallpaper was still a photo she took, Brandon and I smiling stiffly at a brunch I hated. I deleted that photo first. Then I deleted all of them. Then I deleted the apps that held them. Social media accounts vanished like breath on glass. No announcements. No explanations. I became someone new, not because I had a grand reinvention in mind, but because it felt like the only way to survive her. She hadn't just hurt me. She'd rewritten me, pixel by pixel, until people I loved couldn't recognize me. I kept to myself. I stacked wood. I let my hands crack from the cold. I said yes when the woman at the feed store asked if I wanted a job helping restock deliveries. Just a few shifts a week. It didn't matter. No one there knew me as Harper, the one who cheated. They just knew I was quiet, polite, and good at carrying 50-pound bags of grain. But it was during one of those shifts, maybe 2 weeks into my silence, that the illusion of peace cracked open. I was outside, helping unload a shipment, when a car pulled up with Idaho plates. I didn't think anything of it until the woman inside stepped out and said my name. Not ma'am, not hey you, but my full name. Harper, she said, eyes narrowed. You're her, right? I blinked, unsure whether to lie or nod, but something about her face made it clear there was no point. I guess that depends on what you've heard, I said. She didn't laugh. She held up her phone and showed me a photo. Brandon. Smiling. Arm around a woman with long, soft hair and the kind of skin that doesn't flinch under fluorescent lighting. Marjorie stood next to them. All three were beaming. Under the photo was a caption from Boise Women's Leadership Foundation, celebrating mothers and daughters. Blood isn't the only bond that counts. She's talking about Alyssa, the woman said. Is that true? Marjorie calls her daughter now. I looked at the photo for a moment too long, then said, that sounds exactly like something she'd say. I turned and walked back inside without explaining. The woman didn't follow. That night, I sat on the porch with my laptop open for the first time in weeks. I didn't check emails. I didn't Google myself. I went to Marjorie's public foundation page and read every press release from the last 6 months. She'd been busy. Award nominations, leadership summits, guest columns about resilience. She was everywhere, smiling, speaking, building a brand. I opened a new document, typed her name at the top, and underneath it, I wrote, she rewrote me. Let's return the favor. I didn't have a plan. Not yet. But I started organizing what I remembered. I built a map, not literal, not digital, just in a notebook, of every person I knew she spoke to regularly. Her stylist. Her housekeeper. Her friends who ran charities that mostly involved wine and whispered gossip. I drew lines between names, then started filling in what I'd overheard during the last year. She was careless when she thought I wasn't worth noticing. She'd talk openly at brunches, during spa days she insisted I attend, even during phone calls on speaker when she walked around our house like it belonged to her. One of the names jumped out at me, Leanne, her accountant. I remembered Marjorie once complaining that Leanne wouldn't fudge the numbers on the silent auction. I circled her name. Then I remembered something else. At one of those wine-heavy foundation meetings, Marjorie had joked, technically we're not supposed to accept personal gifts from board donors, but if I report this necklace, someone at the IRS is gonna quit. Everyone laughed. I hadn't. But I smiled because back then I thought being polite mattered. Around the same time, I found out Jess had co-signed the lie. I'd gone weeks without hearing from her, and when I finally did, it wasn't a phone call or a text. It was a photo someone tagged me in before I deleted my old account. Jess and Marjorie, side by side at a fundraiser. Jess was holding a glass of champagne. Marjorie's hand rested lightly on her shoulder. The caption read, "Proud of the women who lift each other up, especially after betrayal." That word, betrayal, wasn't an accident. Jess knew what she was doing. I stared at the photo for a long time, then quietly removed her contact from my phone. I didn't block her. I wanted her to wonder if I'd seen it. I didn't reach out to anyone else. I didn't try to clear my name. I waited. And while I waited, I kept sketching. Not just lines and names anymore. I began collecting. Clipping public records, taking screenshots of property transfers, board member changes, suspicious press quotes. I created folders. I highlighted inconsistencies. I began to notice that Marjorie's whole empire, her reputation as a community leader, her nonprofit accolades, her polished image, rested entirely on a few well-cultivated assumptions: that she was generous, that she was honest, and that she played by the rules. But I knew something different. I knew where the cracks were. And I knew how people react when a single question is asked by the right person at the right time. The final piece came on a Thursday afternoon, when the cabin printer, something I'd barely touched in years, came to life with a quiet hum. I was printing a document from the county registrar's site. A foundation audit from the previous year, signed by Marjorie and, surprise, Leanne. It wasn't illegal. Not on its own. But one of the donation entries was from a company that didn't exist anymore. And I knew because that company belonged to my father, who'd sold it before our wedding. I stood there staring at the page as it slid out of the printer. Then I circled the name in red ink. Folded it in half. Slipped it into a new folder labeled simply, "Open." Marjorie was out there, playing Mother of the Year, drinking wine with my ex-best friend, publicly bonding with my replacement like I'd never existed. But I wasn't gone. Not really. And I'd just stopped waiting. The cracks didn't start with a bang. They never do, not in the world Marjorie built. Her life ran on curated lighting and perfectly timed applause. No one expects a controlled burn to become a wildfire. The first fracture came as a rumor. Small. Unverified. Just a whisper posted late at night by an anonymous user in a local Facebook group. Why is Marjorie's foundation listed on a state audit flagged for excessive untraceable donations? That one sentence sat quietly in the comment thread like a lit match left on dry grass. Nobody responded right away. But the next day, the post was deleted. And 2 days after that, a financial journalist who'd been covering nonprofit transparency filed a public records request, just to be thorough. Marjorie didn't flinch publicly, of course. That would have broken the illusion. She responded the way women like her always do, with pearls, platitudes, and an Instagram post full of beaming smiles from a charity brunch she hosted 3 months earlier. "There's power in transparency," the caption read. "We are honored to be held to a higher standard." The post went up at 10:14 a.m. By 11:05, it was flooded with comments that had nothing to do with brunch. Then why is your donation portal down? Why did Leanne leave? Why hasn't your annual report posted? Comments were disabled within the hour. I hadn't done anything publicly. No tweets. No emails. Nothing that could be traced. I had simply sent a well-timed message to one of her major donors, a woman whose name had come up during one of Marjorie's boozy lunches, the kind where she'd start gossiping as soon as the third glass hit the table. The donor had once been pressured to round up her pledge in front of a group. I sent her a PDF copy of the foundation's last 3,990 filings, highlighting the line where her donation was publicly recorded as 5 figures higher than what she'd written on her check. I didn't accuse. I didn't sign the message. I just attached the document with a sticky note that read, thought you'd want to know what you paid for. That donor withdrew from hosting the spring gala within a week. The second fracture was louder. Messier. The kind of thing you can't walk back once it lands in people's inboxes. A local podcast hosted by an ethics consultant dropped its weekly guest episode with the usual fanfare, until, 3 hours later, the host posted a follow-up story saying, "We've pulled today's episode with Marjorie Everett. Some discrepancies have come to our attention and we're reviewing the facts. We'll keep you posted." They didn't elaborate. They didn't need to. People screenshot faster than you can delete. Within hours, her name was trending in the local algorithm, not nationally, but enough that every board member she worked with got a text from someone asking, "Have you seen this?" That was the moment I let myself feel it. Not joy, this wasn't joyful, but clarity. A kind of sharp quietness in the body, like standing in still water just before the current pulls. I was alone in the cabin when I saw it. I remember because I sat down on the cold floor, back against the fridge, holding my phone with both hands, rereading the same sentence over and over like it might disappear. "We've pulled today's episode with Marjorie Everett." I didn't laugh. I didn't cry. I just sat there, until the numbness wore off and the next step became obvious. Later that night, I opened my email for the first time in a week. Sitting at the top was a message from Jess. Subject line, "Hey." No body text. Just an attachment. I almost didn't open it. But curiosity is its own kind of injury, you can ignore it until it throbs. It was a screenshot of Marjorie's private WhatsApp chat with a group of women I used to know. One of the names was crossed out, probably the source. The last message in the chain was Marjorie writing, "She's playing victim to people who don't even know the full story. If Harper thinks she can tank my work with these baseless smears, she'll find herself dealing with legal consequences." No one responded to that message. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I opened a blank reply. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I typed, then erased. Then typed again. "You sided with her. Now you're scared. Don't mistake fear for guilt." I read it 3 times. Sat with it. Then I hit delete. All of it. Backspaced until the page was blank. I didn't send anything. That silence was louder. I started getting alerts after that, not directly from news outlets, but from LinkedIn, from donation sites, from people in the periphery who had begun poking around Marjorie's empire out of curiosity or concern or maybe just gossip. Her assistant's LinkedIn now said seeking new opportunities. One of the smaller charities she partnered with announced a temporary re-evaluation of sponsorship relationships. A former board member made a vague post about the importance of doing your due diligence before aligning with high-visibility figures. It was all subtle. But taken together, it was a weather report, the temperature was dropping. The first true explosion came not from anything I triggered, but from Marjorie herself. I wasn't there to see it, but someone sent me the audio, recorded in the background of a cafe, where she'd been meeting with Brandon. I recognized the voice before I recognized the words. She was loud, sharper than usual, clearly rattled. "You think this is coincidence?" she snapped. "You think it's normal for donors to ghost me, podcasts to pull interviews, and nobody to return calls? She's behind this, Brandon. And you." She cut herself off, but the implication was clear. She thought I was orchestrating something. And she wasn't wrong. But she had no proof. Brandon didn't defend me. He didn't even argue. He just muttered something about being late and excused himself. That was the last anyone saw of them in public together. Then came the sighting. It was a random Tuesday. I was in town, grabbing coffee from a cart I liked. The air was crisp, that fall sharpness starting to creep in, and I was bundled in a worn coat, no makeup, no disguise. I didn't need one. I hadn't spoken to anyone from my past in months. I was just a woman buying coffee on a corner. And then, across the street, she appeared. Marjorie. Stepping out of a nail salon. Hair styled. Sunglasses perched high. She looked powerful, expensive, composed, until her eyes landed on me. She froze. Her entire body paused for half a breath, like a wire had snapped in her spine. Her hand hovered over her purse, her key swinging slightly. Then she blinked, pulled her lips into a tight smile, and took one step forward, only to fumble her glasses. They slipped from her hand, clattered on the concrete. She bent quickly to retrieve them, but I could see the flush rising at her collarbone, the barely masked panic. I didn't move. I didn't smile. I just tilted my head, sipped my coffee, and looked at her the way she used to look at me, like something beneath her shoes. And she knew. Not what I'd done. Not how. But that I wasn't the woman she buried. I was standing. Whole. Watching. She got into her car too fast and peeled away like someone escaping a crime scene. That night, I opened the folder I hadn't touched in weeks. The one labeled open. I pulled out the documents I'd compiled, donation records, cross-referenced filings, receipts, emails forwarded anonymously from disgruntled board members. The pile was thick now, organized. Labeled. And then, as if summoned by timing or instinct or the universe's cold sense of humor, my phone vibrated. A new email. No subject line. No sender listed. Just an attachment. I opened it. It was a scanned letter, and signed, no letterhead, just one line printed cleanly across the center of the page. She forged my name on 2 documents. I'm ready to talk. No name. No return address. But I knew the handwriting. It was Leanne. And I smiled for the first time in weeks, not out of malice, not even out of satisfaction, but because I knew what came next. It was time. It started to move faster than I expected. 1 piece fell, and then 3 more. Then 12. I thought I would feel, I don't know, triumphant. But when the story was finally published, when the journalist called to confirm she was going forward with the article, my hands didn't shake the way I thought they would. Instead, I stood there in the kitchen holding my phone to my ear, staring at the dark reflection in the microwave door, listening to her voice say, I've verified enough to run it. I'm just warning you, if she figures out where this started, she won't go quietly. There was a pause then, not from her, but from me. My silence surprised both of us. Because for one strange moment, maybe less than 3 seconds, I actually thought about telling her not to publish. I thought about what it might do, how far it could spread, how fast. I thought about the way Marjorie weaponized being the victim. How good she was at spinning pain into credibility. And for a second, I saw the mess. The backlash. The possibility that people wouldn't believe it, that it might somehow fall back on me. But then I thought about the brunch. I thought about Brandon's silence. And I thought about how many people had believed Marjorie without question, simply because she smiled louder than I did. So I said, do it. And she did. The article hit local networks at first, small blogs, non-profit accountability sites, a few influencers who enjoyed pointing fingers at charity corruption. Then someone on TikTok made a 2-minute breakdown of the piece, cutting clips of Marjorie's public speeches against screenshots of her falsified donation records. The video went viral. 1 million views in 2 days. Her name started trending, not nationally, but in enough circles that her email inbox overflowed. Sponsors started issuing vague statements. Her foundation's social media went private. The website briefly redirected to a maintenance page. Then it vanished altogether. And that's when the panic started leaking. A former intern posted a video saying she once overheard Marjorie threaten to blacklist a donor for not giving enough. Another clip circulated from a conference 2 years ago where Marjorie dismissed a question from a young black woman as unfocused. Old wounds reopened. People came forward, not just with accusations, but with resignation letters, missing paychecks, emails that had been ignored. And through all of it, Marjorie kept quiet. At first. Then she broke. It was a live video. Not polished. Not filtered. Just her sitting in her living room, no makeup, with one side of her hair tucked back so tightly it looked painful. The curtains were drawn. The lighting was too harsh. Her hands were visible, shaking, clutching a glass of water like it might give her stability. "I never thought I'd be in this position," she began, her voice fragile. "Attacked by people I gave so much to." It wasn't a statement. It was a collapse in slow motion. She sniffled once. Then again. She tried to dab her eyes with a tissue but missed, smudging eyeliner across her cheek. Her hand trembled as she reached for a note card and squinted at it, then gave up and tossed it aside. The video wasn't shared by her PR team, it was posted from her personal account, raw and unreviewed. That's how I knew she'd lost control. Marjorie never did anything without calculating the outcome. And it was that version of her, the messy, undone, desperate version, that finally made people believe. A few days later, someone leaked an internal email. It was addressed to the remaining members of the foundation's board. Subject line: "We need to talk." In it, she accused unnamed individuals of betrayal, claimed she had proof this was a coordinated attack, and threatened legal action against any former employees who contributed to defamation. The email was riddled with typos, incomplete sentences, and one final sentence that made me stop reading and just stare. I am not the villain here. But she was. And finally, she knew it. Brandon didn't show up publicly during any of this. No posts. No statements. But I knew he was watching. I could feel it in the way I'd started showing up in his orbit again, mutual friends suddenly checking my LinkedIn, old classmates liking decade-old photos. People were searching, trying to make sense of what had happened. He waited until most of the dust had settled before he reached out again. This time, not with a call. With a message. Just 5 words: "Can we talk in person?" I didn't answer right away. I let it sit for a full day. Then I told him to meet me in a park downtown, the same place we'd once sat on a bench and talked about our future while feeding ducks. When I arrived, he was already sitting, elbows on knees, staring at the water like it might give him courage. "I shouldn't have believed her," he said the moment I sat down. "I know that doesn't change anything, but I need you to hear me say it." I looked at him. Really looked. He seemed older. Not in the way time does, but in the way guilt ages a person when they finally stop pretending they were right. "I know what I gave up," he said. "I see it now." I didn't answer. I just let the silence sit there between us. After a while, he asked, "Did you do all of it?" I smiled, just once. Not smug. Not proud. Just enough to let him know he was asking the wrong question. "I didn't destroy her, Brandon," I said. "I just let her be seen." He looked away, blinked hard, and nodded. He didn't ask for anything else. And I didn't offer. We both knew that moment was the end. Not of the conversation. Of us. A few days later, I went to her office. Or what used to be her office. The name was gone. The signage scraped clean. Movers were finishing up, carrying out labeled boxes and old furniture, a half-used whiteboard leaning against a dolly with the words "Mentorship Strategy" barely visible beneath the smudges. I stood across the street for a while, watching. Not hiding. Just watching. And when they were gone, I crossed. Inside the lobby, the cork board by the elevator was empty. I pulled the envelope from my coat, thicker now than before, and slid it behind the glass. It didn't make a sound. Just settled there quietly, waiting. Inside were 5 things. A copy of the article. A printout of Leanne's handwritten letter. A screenshot of Brandon's message. A still from the viral TikTok with her face frozen mid-sentence. And a photo. Me. Marjorie. Brandon. On the back, I'd written a single sentence. The difference between you and me? You erase. I remember. I looked at it through the glass. And for the first time in months, I saw myself reflected back, alone, yes, but standing. Not ruined. Not erased. I walked outside, pulled my coat tighter, and let the cold wind rush over me like applause no one else could hear. And as I turned the corner, I saw someone watching me from a nearby bench, an older woman, holding a coffee, eyes narrowed just slightly. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. We both knew what had happened here. And I kept walking. Because it was done. Because she was finished. Because I didn't need to raise my voice. I never had to.